Hi, I'm Mr. Miller, and this is a lesson on making a histogram. So I collected some data from my Math 8 students. It was their heights, and here's the list of their heights in no particular order. This data is coming from the 1-3 Math 8 class for the 2019-2020 school year. And so I've got this list, and as you can see, it's not in any particular order. It's not like it's from least shortest to tallest or tallest to shortest. We just had people come up, measured their heights, and wrote them down on the board, and now I've transcribed it onto this onto the screen for you. So what we're supposed to do here before we make a histogram, and by the way, the purpose of making a histogram is to get a frequency distribution for a measured quantity. So the measured quantity here is student heights, and we want to know how many students are in each height range. So we're going to be making ranges of heights in here, and we're going to be counting how many people are in each height interval. And once we get a tally, then we can change that to a number, and then we'll be able to make what's going to look like a bar graph. So we have to do some sorting, as it's mentioned in the instructions here, into appropriate height intervals, and we're looking to start with approximately 6 intervals, and we can always have a little bit more, a little bit less, but 6 is a good number to work with. We're going to use this tally chart to determine the frequency of the students in each height interval, and then when it's filled, we're going to be making a histogram. I'll show you how to do it on paper, and of course, I will also do a demo of it on Excel. So let's go through some steps here. First of all, we're going to be starting slightly below the lowest datum, or the lowest number, the shortest height. So we need to find the lowest height, and if you look through this data here for the smallest number, you should find that it's 152 centimeters. So I'm going to record that here, that I'm going to start just below that at 150 centimeters. Now the next thing I need to know is this first interval is going to start at 150, and it's going to go up to, how high is it going to be? 150 to 160, or 150 to 155, or something in between, something even more, 150 to 200. Probably wouldn't want to make the interval that wide. We'd have everybody in one interval, and we wouldn't get any frequency distribution. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to look for an appropriate interval width, and the goal here is we want to have about 6 intervals. So that's why I'm going to take the range. I'm going to take the largest number and subtract the smallest number to find out what is the difference between the largest and smallest number, or height, and then divide that into 6 intervals. So I need to find the largest height, and here it is, 178 centimeters. I'm going to subtract the smallest height, which is 152 centimeters. That difference is 26. And I'm going to divide that by 6, and I get 4.3 repeated. Now an interval width of 4.3 repeated is kind of awkward to work with. I don't want to have to go from 150 to 154.3 repeated, and then go from 154.3 repeated up to 158.6 repeated, and so on. So what I'm going to choose to do is I'm going to choose an interval width of 5 centimeters. You notice that I had put interval width is, and I didn't put an equal sign here, I actually put a little squiggly line instead of a straight line. This means approximately equal to the maximum minus the minimum divided by 6. So this 4.3 repeated is not the exact interval width, but it gives us an idea of what we should be working with. And so I chose an interval width of 5 centimeters because 5 is a nice round number. It's easy to count by 5s, 150, 155, 160, 165, and so on. So now I'm going to be able to fill in what each of these intervals is going to be. So I've started just below the lowest number, 152, and I go up by my interval width 5, and then I go 155 to 160, 160 to 165, and I continue on until I get just above the largest datum here, which is 178. So now from here, what I can do is I can start to get a tally for the number of students that are have heights that are in each height interval. So I'm going to start with 157 centimeters, and I'm going to find the interval that it falls in here. And of course, that is this one. So I've got a tally of one person in this 155 to 160 centimeter height interval, and now I'm going to go on to the next one. Well, the next one is 156.5, and that's in the same interval. And then I'm going to go to 152, and this is in the one above it. So 152 centimeters, it's between 150 and 155, so that's why this tick mark showed up here. Now the next one is a little bit challenging, 170, because you may be looking at it and saying, should I put it in this height interval because it goes up to 170, or should it go into the next interval which starts at 170? Well, take a look at the wording of this column header here. It says height in centimeters over including. So the heights that are listed here, you're supposed to have the interval is over this bottom number, goes up to and including these numbers. So let me just rephrase that, see if I can make it more clear. This interval is all heights that are over 165 centimeters tall, up to and including 170 centimeters tall. The next interval are all heights that are over 170 centimeters tall, and it's up to and including 175 centimeters tall. So hopefully that makes it clear now that the 170, right, the 170 centimeters, we're trying to figure out where should this one be counted. It is included in this interval, and so for that reason we're going to put the tick mark there. So, and now we proceed on and check out each datum and put it into the appropriate interval. And once you've done that, then you can read off those frequencies, change those tallies into numbers. And of course, we usually group in fives, so it makes it a little bit easier to count, especially when you get to bigger numbers. So 5, 6, 7, and so on. All right, so we've got all of the frequencies figured out. Now let's talk about how to make this histogram. So I'm going to set up my axes. I'm going to put numbers of students. Notice that I started at 0, I went up to the maximum number, and I spaced these out equally. I'm also going to set up along the horizontal axis for the student heights, the height intervals in centimeters. And you notice that I didn't just go 150, 155, 160 and squish it all into this very small space. I'm trying to use up all of the space that I have for graphing here. And this would correspond to about half a page for you. You could certainly take up an entire page if you wanted to, but this is fine. And so the next thing I want to do is I want to put a title at the top, and you'll notice that I have kind of a lengthy title, and it's because I want to make sure that I'm clear that this is a really specific set of students that I'm talking about. I'm talking about a student height distribution here, but if that was my title, you wouldn't know which students I'm talking about. So it's for Mr. Miller's 1-3 Maths 8 class at Walnut Grove Secondary School in the school year 2019-2020. And so now it's really clear where this data is coming from. So what I can do next is I can make each bar to the correct height. So the first interval was 2 students in that height interval. The next interval, there were 5 students, and then 5 students in the next interval, and 5 students in the next one. And students in the 170 to 175 height interval, there were 7. And finally, for the last height interval, we had 2 people that were in that range of heights. So that's how you create a histogram on paper. The next thing that I'd like to do is show you how to make it on Microsoft Excel. So you'll notice that I have all of the heights listed in one column here, and I've got height in centimeters listed at the top. And now I did a sort. You don't have to do that. I just did that so it makes it a little bit easier to look at and understand what's going on in terms of this frequency distribution. But all I'm going to do here is I'm going to select all of these cells and I'm going to go to Insert. Now you can look under recommended charts if you want to. Take a look, there's a variety of ones here. And actually the one that I'm going to select is going to be under here, Statistical, and I'm going to choose the histogram. Now what you'll notice is that the histogram that's built into Excel has determined for me that there are only going to be 3 height intervals. And so that's fine if I wasn't particular about it, but let's say I wanted to know a little bit more about the distribution of heights in my class and I wanted to break this up into smaller intervals, or some people call these smaller bins. So if I want to do that, then I need to do a little bit of customization. And so for that reason, I'm going to delete this, and I'm actually going to do some work a little bit differently. So here is an alternative. What you can do is you can look at height limits. Okay, so up to 155 centimeters tall, up to 160, up to 165, up to 170, up to 175, and up to 180. So once you have that set up, what you can do is you can go in here and you can do a special function. So you have to put in the equal sign first, and then you type in frequency. And you notice that is a predefined function. And what it says here is that you need to specify the data array. So this is the data array here. This is the set of all the heights for my students. And then I'm going to put a comma. And then I'm going to select the bin array. Now the bin array is these maximum heights for each height interval. And then I close the brackets and I press enter and it will fill that in. Notice that these numbers 2, 5, 5, 5, 7, 2 correspond with the height intervals that I had determined myself. But Excel can do this for you automatically. And this is a nice thing to do, especially if you have a large amount of data. You don't want to look at every single datum individually and put it in the right height interval and then have to do a tally and figure out the frequency and then do the graph. It's very time consuming. So Excel can save you a lot of trouble that way. Now the next thing that I would recommend to do, because this is a little bit of a custom job here, is to specify this height interval in off to the side here. So I'm going to go 150 up to 155, and I'm going to go 155 up to 160, and I'm going to go 160 up to 165, and 165 up to 170, and 170 up to 175, and 175 up to 180. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select these cells, and then I'm going to hold down on the command button for my Mac and select these cells. So whatever the corresponding is on a PC, I'm not 100% sure. I'm going to show you an alternative in 1 second, but let me just finish up with how do you make this graph. So I'm going to go to Insert, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to select a bar graph. And notice this is basically what I'm looking for. Now, I just realized that it's maybe a little bit inconvenient the way I have the everything set up here. So what I can do is, if I just back up here, I'm going to undo a few steps. Undo, undo, undo. Undo, undo, undo. Undo the doo-doo, as they say. So actually, if I take these height limits and I keep them there, but I do the calculation here. If I go equals frequency, and then I go in brackets, and I select the data again, and then I go comma, and I say this is the bins array. So this is the maximum height 155 for the first bin, the maximum height is 160 for the second bin, and so on. So now I get this, and now I can put that 155 up to 160, the 160 up to 165. Oh, sorry, supposed to start at 150, right? 150 to 155, 155 up to 160, 160 up to 165, 165 up to 170, 170 up to 175, 175 up to 180. Okay, so the nice thing is that now I've made it a little bit more convenient for selection. I can just select, and we've got the interval and the frequency right beside each other. So it's a little bit more convenient. I guess I could have moved it over here a little bit, but whatever. So now I can go Insert, and I'm going to choose a bar graph. Now I'm going to make this bar graph a little bit bigger. So I'm going to go like so, and I'm going to go like so, just so it's occupying a little bit more space, and it'll show up larger on your screen as you're looking at this. Now this is not looking exactly the way that I want it, so I can make some changes here. You know, you can either go into quick layout and say, oh yeah, I want to have title, I want to have a legend, and well, we don't really need a legend. There's only one set of data. So, you know, if I'm looking at this, I might say, this layout looks pretty good. Title, both axes labeled, I can go for that. I'm not really keen on it taking out all of the lines in here. I think it becomes a little bit hard to tell what everything is. So I'm going to add individual options in here. The one thing that I want to have is I want to have the horizontal title there, axis title, and I want to have the vertical axis title there so that I can put in some things in there. So title, I'm just going to put in the title, which is the student height distribution for Mr. Miller's 1-3 Maths 8 class, and this is at WGSS in the year 2019-2020. That's the school year. And then I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to select this. I'm going to select all, and I'm going to rename this. This is the number of students. Alternatively, you could just call it frequency. And over here, I'm going to call this the student height intervals, and this is in centimeters. And now I'm going to click on the bars, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Format. Oh, actually, here's what I'll do. I'm going to double click on this, or you can right click on it, and you can or maybe it's under here. Right click. Oh yeah, sorry, we want to format the axis. Now for the axis, what we want to do is we want to look at the bear with me for one moment here. I just have to find the option. It's maybe in the bars. Right here, yeah, okay, so in the bars, I want to format this data series, and what I want to do is I want to change this, the gap. It's not showing it for me right now, so it's a little bit inconvenient. Okay. There we go. So the gap width, I want to change that to 0. So there's a general rule for histograms that you always have your bars touching, and now I have a graph that looks like what I did on paper. So it takes a little bit of mucking around with things. You know, me personally, I kind of like to have an axis here. So, you know, I would have to select this axis and then bring up the format pane. And then I would want to go here and give it a solid line. And personally, I think it should be black. I like my axes to be black. And so now when I deselect that, you should see, yeah, there's the axis. Okay, so I would encourage you to take a look at this on Excel, see if you can make it yourself. And you can always go in and mess around with the design, see if you can get some, ooh, doesn't that look nice with a little bit of different shading. Now it does put numbers on it. If you don't like something, you can always undo it. But you can change the color scheme. So if you prefer to have something a different color, you can certainly do that. How about some Gator Green? Ooh, that's lovely. Okay. So, for me personally, I will accept if students can make a histogram either on paper or on Excel. Either would be fine to me. As long as you know how to make a histogram, then that's cool. So, that's it for the lesson on how to make a histogram. Thanks for watching. Have a great day. Bye.